All right, so let's talk about listings. Talk about CMAs. Have either of you even practiced with the CMA or?
I did a little while ago. Just like
Mhm.
went online, try. I think I took like one property or something and
Okay.
try to compare it to other ones, stuff like that. I guess they have like a quick CMA
Mhm.
detail and then a further detailed one or something like that.
Yeah.
That's all I've done with that.
Okay. Have you gotten into it at all, Austin?
Yeah, getting into I like try doing CMAs like on my own property just to see what it was like, and then like on my parents' property.
Sure.
Um, and then I saw like the different ones they have through what he was talking about, the one like right there through MLS, and then on like RPR, just seeing the
Right.
um different ones.
Right. So, I mean, here's the thing is that people think that CMAs are just, a lot of realtors think that you run in and you do a CMA very quickly. It takes a lot of time to do a CMA. You've got to spend a lot of time figuring out what you're going to use, what features of the property, how it's managed, what you're going to compare to, how does an appraiser look at this, how does a buyer look at this, how does the lender look at this. So while you're doing the CMA, it's very similar to an appraisal. It can't be called an appraisal because we're not licensed appraisers, but
Mhm.
it's very similar to what an appraiser is going to do. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what makes up an appraisal, and how important it is to be able to really understand what you're doing with an appraisal. So that booklet that I sent you, Austin, this is kind of what we're going to go over. We're going to really talk about what a CMA is. We're going to talk a little bit about who needs a CMA. We're going to talk about selecting comparables, why and how you select comparable properties. We'll talk about what it means to create a CMA. You've got great places to go to give yourself some guidelines like an RPR. A lot of sellers obviously use Zillow. I don't know how valuable that's going to be anymore. Presenting the CMA, how you want to present the CMA to the seller. So those are some of the things that we're going to talk about. First, what is a comparable market analysis? It's a CMA. So this is really just looking at what's in the market. This is really kind of identifying an estimate of value expressed as a price range. Remember, whatever you're doing should always be expressed as a range. The minute that you say a price, you take ownership of it. Your job is to determine what a value range is for that property, and then for the seller to set the price. Based on what the seller sets as the price, you'll know how marketable the property is, how realistic the seller is. You'll have a much better understanding of how to develop your marketing and to determine whether or not you really even want to take the listing. If the seller is completely unrealistic about the pricing of the property, you may not want to take the listing. It may not be something that's important to you. So what's involved really in the CMA is you got to start to think about it. It's not just a one-step thing. Too often realtors come in and they go, oh, I've got to put together a market analysis for a property, and then they narrow it down to a price per square foot, or they just go, oh, here's my CMA, here's a bunch of properties that are for sale, closed. Don't take a look at what the condition of the property is, the age of the sale. So what's really involved in identifying or creating a CMA, you really need to have an inspection of the property. You need to be able to, this is why we say that when you do a listing appointment or you have your seller consult, it really should be in more than one step. It should never be just in one step because it's hard to evaluate a property if you've never seen a property.
Mhm.
So you really need to inspect the property. You need to really kind of take a look at the property, see what's in it, see what makes it up. There we go, inspection of the property. You need to analyze the neighborhood. So is this neighborhood similar to other neighborhoods around it? What's going on in this neighborhood? What's the trending in this neighborhood? What's the market look like in this neighborhood? How long are things staying on the market? Are there a lot of other things currently on the market? So analyzing the neighborhood is really important to understand and evaluate an input in the CMA. So your market summary is a great thing to utilize for your for an analysis of analysis of the neighborhood. Then you're looking at things like market information. Well, what's going on in the market? Are there other subdivisions coming in around it? Does this back up to a preserve? Are there more expensive homes around it? How far is the subdivision that looks similar to it? What kind of businesses are going in? How is the trending on the value of the market been? What's general market information versus micro market information, either around the community or around the area or around the general market, around the general market itself, what's going on. Property knowledge. What do you know about the properties in that market? Have you seen other homes that are available for sale? Have you gone into other properties that are available for sale? What do you know about the property that you're considering listing or that the seller is asking you to list? So all of that plays into creating a CMA. You have to have the knowledge of the other stuff that's around. Sometimes we even recommend taking the current seller on a showing tour if they're too unrealistic about the pricing. What do the other properties look like that are going to be their competition, or the properties that are going under contract right now? What do they look like? You can get into those. Are there going to be adjustments you make? So when you're looking at a neighborhood and you're looking at a property, you need to figure out whether that home has certain features that are considered consistent for that price point in that market area, or do they have upgrades, or is the house not as in as good condition as other homes that are currently on the market? How does that impact the value? So you could make adjustments based on square footage. You could make adjustment based on bedrooms or bathrooms. You could make adjustments pool versus not. So these features are the types of things that you want to adjust on. And remember, you'll make adjustments to comparables, never to subject properties. Then you need to do the comparable analysis. What other properties exist? How many properties can I find? Do I have to go outside of the current neighborhood or the current area? Because you're going to be working in areas where there aren't a lot of subdivisions, as well as areas that have a lot of subdivisions. So if you're looking around Jack's Golf and Country Club, there are a few other subdivisions. Well, if you look over in Avondale or Riverside, those aren't really subdivisions. They're not all bound and created in a similar manner. So you'll have to find similar homes, similar age, similar sales, that kind of thing.
Speaking of that, in my neighborhood, actually, a house just went up for sale.
Oh, good. Okay.
So, if on that topic of finding comps, just for my own personal, just figuring out, say, like we were to go sell our home one day,
Right.
what can we do right now? Like just practice for myself. So this house is like on the corner street, and it went up for 475, I believe.
Okay.
They're having an open house, I think this weekend. I'm gonna go check it out and
Yeah, you should.
um,
You should.
just see what they've done to their house. I think they've updated like their kitchen and a couple of bathrooms, stuff like that, kind of made that more the gray tones and stuff like that.
So a good exercise for you after this discussion will be to potentially go ahead and do an analysis of your property.
Okay.
See what you think your home should list at. And then go see this one and see what it's listed at. You probably already know, you said 475. So, is that a good listing price? Is that a not so great listing price? You'll want to watch it to see how soon it comes off the market. Since it's a small subdivision with not a lot available, it may be very popular. So, and it's at the entrance to Jack's Golf and Country Club. So that could be another opportunity for you there. So I would take a look and see what you think your house value is right now and practice with CMAs, comparing it to that when you go see it, how your home compares, what adjustments do you think would need to be made in pricing your property versus how that property was priced, and then look at some subdivisions around it. It would be a great example of how to use a CMA.
Cool. Perfect. Oh, like that was perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah.
I saw it. I was like, oh,
yeah,
for sale.
Yeah, which is great. And who's it listed by?
It's a smaller yard sign there. I rode past it. I saw the person's name, Phyllis Styles or something like that. It was something LLC.
Okay.
I'll take a look and I'll let you.
Yeah.
know.
So yeah, so you want to look at that. I mean, you can look it up in MLS too and see who has it listed. So uses for the CMA. So loan modifications. So you may have a friend or family member that says, oh, can you give me a CMA, or what's often called a broker price opinion? They might be doing a loan modification. You could get a call from a bank or a lender asking for a market analysis, and that's often known as a broker price opinion. Short sales and pre-foreclosures. Oftentimes CMAs are used as tools in evaluating offers that come in on short sales and pre-foreclosures. A bank wants to know what the market value is so that they can compare to determine if they're taking a short sale or not. So that can be used as a tool to help someone. So if you meet a seller that is in a situation where they may not be able to sell the home for what they owe on it, and you're helping them talk to the bank about whether the bank or the lender will accept less than what's owed, the lender or the bank may request a CMA or request some sort of market analysis. So it's a great way to be able to help in that process. It can be used as trend analysis when you're trending to see what the value is of different features, when you're looking to see what the market trend analysis is, or to support something like a market summary. It can be used in mediation. So if there's a mediation that occurs over a property that's been sold, a CMA can be a tool in that mediation or in that discussion. So not always the best place to be, but it can be used for trust analysis. If a trust would like to analyze the value of the assets of the trust, it can be used in a trust analysis. Or if the trust is being transferred, or when a person passes away, a CMA can be a great tool to establish the value of a property at the time of the passing or at the time of the exchange of the property or the transfer of the property to another individual. So trust analysis is a way that it works. You'll hear about broker price opinions. Broker price opinions can be used for lenders. They can be used when someone is moving from one location to another and using a relocation department. Broker price opinions are often something that you'll get called to do, and that's for someone who is a third party looking to establish a value on a property. Broker price opinions, they used to be a means or a way to attempt to get a little extra cash, possibly, but they don't pay very well. I would really probably not recommend doing a lot of BPOs. Although they can be great practice. You will have to do BPOs if you work with anybody who's using a third-party relocation company. They do require them. So in your booklets where there's a property value source overview, so we'll kind of take a peek at some of that. The property value sources, CMA, of course, your appraisal. These are different sources that you can utilize. Excuse me, utilize in development of your CMA. You've got your AVMs. So if you're going to be looking at something like a Zestimate or RPR is probably the strongest. Those are AVMs. Remember, AVMs are automated valuation models. So they're preset, kind of what their guidelines are. They don't always take into consideration adjustments that may need to be made. Actually, they don't take into consideration adjustments. So AVMs are kind of guidelines. And again, sellers sometimes have those that they've looked at, and it's not always the best place to go. BPOs, if you've done previous BPOs, you can use those as sources when you're creating your CMA. Excuse me. But who really needs a CMA? So if you've got your packets, if you'll see what we've done is try to, under the property value source overview, is really try to, before we move on to who needs it, is evaluate some of those sources. So a CMA is a great source for a value because it takes into consideration quite a bit. It can be used by a real estate professional, or as we've seen, it can be used by a lender or a lawyer or someone doing trust evaluation. Its purpose is really the purchase or the sale. It can be used in loan modification, often used in distressed properties. The appraisal itself, remember, this is a licensed appraiser that does this. We don't do these, although it can be, we do something very similar. But really, this is to establish the value that the lender, or they establish the value of the collateral so the lender can lend to the purchase price or the appraised value. You have your AVMs that you can use as resources, and then of course broker price opinions. So we've tried to lay it out in the booklet to just kind of show you who uses them, who creates them, so you have a better idea. When we're talking about who needs a CMA, well, there's pretty much everybody needs a CMA. Buyers need a CMA. So people, a lot of realtors forget that there's a reason to use a CMA with a buyer. You know, a buyer wants to know or is going to ask you, well, what do you think I should offer? And they're going to look to you for that. And again, everything that you recommend should be in a range, should never be a price specific, should always be a range. That's why when you're talking to sellers, sometimes when you are interviewing, the first things they're going to ask is, well, what do you think I should list it at? Well, I haven't seen it yet. Remember, you really need to see the house before you can identify what you're going to, or before you can truly evaluate it, create a strong CMA. But putting a price on a property means that you own the price. They don't own the price. It's not a really good idea for you to own the price. They need to own the price. Jessica joined us. You look like you had a comment.
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, I didn't. I'm good.
Okay.
I agree.
So buyers, I think buyers need a CMA. They need to know kind of what the market's doing. A CMA really helps them understand pricing. It also helps them understand in the process, if they go low for what you're recommending, how their offer may be received. If they go high, maybe it'll help them with their negotiation. So what their negotiation opportunity is. So buyers can really use a CMA. Sellers, I think sellers obviously need a CMA, right? It's part of what they're going to expect from us, I think. And they're going to expect a good CMA, not a CMA that took 15 minutes. A good CMA takes a lot of time. You got to evaluate the market, you got to evaluate property. So it's really important for the seller to understand why. And guess who else needs it? We need it. So we need CMAs. We need to understand how to do them. We need to understand kind of where they sit. We understand the importance of them. And I think too often we as realtors diminish the importance of a CMA by rushing in to do a CMA 15 minutes before we're supposed to meet with the seller or anyone like that. You should be doing CMAs on a regular basis to make sure you're aware of areas that you're trying to target. Or if there's a particular property type that you're trying to target, you should be doing CMAs on those. A CMA is a great tool to reach out to past customers to see if maybe they would like to understand how their investment is doing. So even if you just sold a house a year ago to someone, it's not a bad thing to reach out to them and say, hey, I was just reviewing information. I see we closed about a year ago. Oftentimes on the anniversary of the sale, I provide a CMA for my sellers or for my customers. Would you like a CMA, an updated CMA on your property to see how your investment's done? It's not a bad thing at all. It's a great way to stay in touch, another reason to reach out. It's providing another resource or providing you as another resource. It's providing you as continue to reinforce you as the expert in this process. So I think it's a great tool to use for sellers or for past customers too, because it's a way to communicate with them. So we kind of summarized that on the advantages of using a CMA. Of course, with sellers, they're looking for something that's fact-based, that they want to be able to relate to. They're looking for something that's going to give them a stronger pricing evaluation. Buyers, again, fact-based information helps them set an idea of where they want to make an offer. And again, you as the expert can really help them by understanding where their offer or the options that their offer may bring to them. So if they bring a high offer, it may bring quick acceptance. What are their negotiation opportunities once after they have acceptance? Well, could be in the repairs and replacements, could be in other ways. If they're concerned about locking up a property versus being able to work with the property, or if they make a low offer and it's rejected, because of course helping them understand what the seller's options are is important. Agents, of course, stronger supported pricing, more informed and broader based understanding of the market as well as the tools in the market. I think it's really important to make sure that we're clear on all of that. So, excuse me. For CMA terminology, just to kind of make sure we're thinking about the same lines, location. So what are we talking about with location?
Where's that? I missed that term.
You missed that term? But we'll go back here.
Uh,
We'll just stick with CMA terminology.
Oh,
We'll just start with
okay.
adjustment. How about we start with adjustment?
Yes.
So if in your packet, there's the chart with some different terminology. Let's
Well, what
start
were you
with
gonna say
adjustment.
about location? Because that is important.
We'll get to location.
Okay.
It's good. Location is one of the things that when you're selecting the properties too. So,
Okay.
so let's talk about terminology just itself. Adjustments. What do you think about adjustments?
Add and subtract.
Add and subtract.
You're gonna look at the comparables and see your subject property, what it has, and then what the comparables have. So if you were to have your subject property maybe have an outdated kitchen, but the other comparables had nicer kitchens, then you would have to take a little bit off of your subject property to offset the nicer kitchens in that area.
Okay, let's back up just a little
Sorry.
bit. You would make the adjustment to the comparable property, not the subject property.
Right.
Right. So you said we would adjust the subject property.
Oh,
So
sorry.
just to be
Right.
so when you're making adjustments, you're making adjustments for things that are outside of the consistency of the properties you're evaluating. So the example that Jessica used was if we have a not updated kitchen in our subject property, but the majority of our comparables have updated kitchens, we may need to adjust those comparables that have updated kitchens, adjust their pricing to be more commensurate with the subject property so we get a stronger value for the subject property. So we make those adjustments to the comparables. Yeah, so if it's a nicer, we slice, bad, we add. Okay, so feature is nicer or less nice. So adjustments
That's a
are
good one to remember too. The nicer slice, bad add. Because
nice.
once you get in there and start working with it, you're like, what's that again?
Right.
You know, you start looking at different features.
The one that I remember from the course was CIA and CBS.
What is that?
Comp, inferior, add, comp, better, subtract.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
It's- That's just one that stuck with me.
CIA and what?
CBS,
CBS. Okay, that's good.
Wait,
CIA.
CIA and CBS. Okay.
Comp, inferior, add.
Great.
And then comp,
Better.
bad,
Or comp,
better, add. CBS.
Yeah, comp, better,
Subtract.
subtract.
Yes.
The nice slice one rhyme, so it makes it.
Yes, I like that it rhymes.
So there are a lot of ways to remember that, but which is great. So I'm glad you guys have connected with that. So comparable, where you're making those adjustments, comparable will be a property that would be considered similar to the property, your subject property. And then competition is anything that's currently on the market. So this competition would be a property that's currently active on the market,
Mhm.
that is similar to the property that you've got, or that someone would consider when considering the property that you're considering listing. And the cost is actually what it would cost to do something. So we'll talk about two different types of analysis that you can do on a property. And cost-based analysis is based on the cost to replace or repair something versus market, which is a value that's given. Market price is what the property actually sells for or is marketed at. So that's the market price. So a market price would be something that is closed. You would have a market price on something that's closed. You wouldn't, your competition would be your active. Your market price would be something that's really closed. As would be your market value. These are the most likely prices a property would sell for in a competitive and open market. So a market price is going to be what's listed. Excuse me, I should say that. Market price would be what's listed. Market value would be what's closed.
The market price is listed.
Market price is listed. So that's what your competition is currently at. Market value would be what's closed. So that's a way to differentiate. And then we've got your neighborhood. So that's your geography that you're looking at. And the thing about neighborhood that we have to kind of take into consideration is, remember, if there's not a lot that's sold or not a lot that's going on in a neighborhood, if the neighborhood is not very active, we may need to find a neighborhood that is close to, and that neighborhood should be comparable in its format too. There's a couple right out there.
I literally just had pen and a highlighter.
And then the price is the amount that's paid for the property.
I got it.
So, well, there's a couple right out there. If anybody wants to go. Good, all right.
Thank you.
And then the sales comparison is like a comparable analysis, is what we're doing here. So this is what we're talking about putting together, is a sales comparison. Again, what you're looking at in a sales comparison is properties that are similar. So the terminology is important because all of these pieces will be added to or involved in creating your CMA. So let's talk a little bit about selecting comparable properties. So when you're selecting comparable properties, one of the first things that you're going to want to look at is location. So comparable properties are going to need to be in a similar location. So you want to have them in a similar neighborhood. If you're looking at a subdivision, that would be your first place to go for your comparables. If you can't find enough comparables in that subdivision, you're going to want to find a subdivision that is similar, and you can move over to that subdivision. If you go to a subdivision that seems to be contiguous or right next door, that's great as long as the homes are of a similar age, that the values are considered similar. When your style of home, absolutely, yeah. So location is really relevant, and you may need to make adjustments on location if you have to go outside of the subdivision you're using. The age of the sale, so customarily we want to look at properties that are within 6 to 12 months. That's about as far as you want to go, is 12 months. On the age of a sale, you're really looking to stay within six, maybe 8 months. When you start to get to 12, you need to evaluate whether the market shifted in any way, shape, which of course you can see through a market summary as to how market shifts have occurred month over month. But the age of the sale may need some adjustment. So how old of a sale is it? And if you're looking at particular properties, like I know, Jessica, you've looked at waterfront properties as possibly being an opportunity. Waterfront properties work very differently. So you would be looking at, that would be the dictator of its kind of neighborhood, would be the fact that it's waterfront. And then you're going to find a variety of different styles when you pick a particular property type that you're going to go after in your marketing. So age of a sale is going to really be relevant in there also, because you may not have as many. Age of the home. So it would be unusual to, unless you can show that there is no differential in value, the age of a home, so a home built in 1920s versus a home built in 2020, right? 100 years difference. Is there a difference in value? And what you'll find is in certain markets that may not be as great of a determining factor. So when you look at infill or in building in something like a Springfield or a Riverside or an Avondale, some of the new construction homes are selling for the same value as a resale that's been renovated. So it may not, the age of the home may not make a huge difference in certain market areas, but in other market areas, it will make a big difference. The size of the home. You don't want to compare homes that are 3,400 square feet to a home that's 1,500 square feet. Very different. So your homes have to be as similar as possible. Then we're talking about floor plan or style. So is the floor plan, what's the floor plan? What's the flow? What's the style of the home? Are you comparing similar style homes? Many subdivisions are built to have similar style homes with 2 or 3 different elevations per home, but still a similar style, whether it's the Key West style or the Beach Walk style or whatever it happens to be. There's the Highland style out on Beach Boulevard, so which is all very similar in their look and feel. So subdivisions sometimes provide that, but when you're looking outside of a subdivision, you may need to consider the style or the floor plan of that.
So that's something I'd like to hit a point on. I've noticed here lately working with, just discussing with potential buyers that someone's stuck on a particular floor plan in a certain subdivision. And how do you pull that floor plan for certain subdivisions if it's not listed on the MLS or on a home that's being sold, but somebody's like, hey, I really want this floor plan and that subdivision. How would you access that information?
So if they want a particular floor plan in a completed subdivision or
in a completed subdivision they've
Okay.
been looking at for some time, things
Okay.
come on the market. Because I know this happened with, I guess, one of Brett's clients or customers, and he was able to look up that information somehow, and then he sent letters to to people in the community saying, hey, I've got a buyer that's interested in your particular floor plan. Would you like to sell your home? How do you access that information? Because
Well,
I have heard people ask me, hey, do you have the whatever? I'm like, oh, that's a good question. I don't
okay,
know.
so you'd have to go back to the history in MLS.
Okay.
So you'd have to research that subdivision and then find out, obviously who the builder was of that subdivision, if it's an older subdivision. If it's a newer subdivision, so what Brett was talking about is in his community,
Mhm.
the builder built the same floor plans throughout. So those same floor plans are still available, so you can see which ones are which. Oftentimes you have to use a plat map to see what floor plans or what styles were built on what parcels. But those are usually only given by the developer or the builder. So after the subdivision is completed, the only way you would know that is based on information that could be potentially given to you by the current seller if they bought it from the builder, or if you went back in the history in MLS and you researched the different properties and were able to see when the seller had that, or excuse me, when the builder had that property, what floor plan they attached to it. Or if you see that there are similar elevations attached to that floor plan.
Elevations.
So that elevation would be the front of the home. So home A may have 3 different elevations, 1, 2, and 3. So if you know that home A, which has the particular floor plan that you're looking at, came with these 3 different elevations, you can move through the neighborhood and see which ones have those elevations. If you go through MMT, of course, once a subdivision is completed, you can pull up all of the homes in the subdivision and then use the square footage feature to group the homes based on square footage, which are usually an indication of the floor plan also. So if it's not brand new, you have to do a little bit of research. For what I will say is a great resource that we have in MLS is the condo resource in MLS, condo floor plans. So if you go into your menu and you type in condo, you'll see it in there. And it actually has the floor plan or the layout of every single condo in the building. So it's a little easier for condos than it is for subdivisions when you're looking for that kind of a feature.
And that's listed on the MLS under.
It's in your menu under condo. What's it called? Condo something. But you can actually go into that application. You can pull up a building and see all the floor plans in that building. They've all been mapped out. Again, it's a little harder for a subdivision. For the subdivision, you'll have to do a history search, like go back in the history and find out when the house was sold and see if there are any attachments in MLS, like the actual floor plan in MLS. And you don't always know if the elevations have changed. The views of the home have changed. So selecting properties is based on features and amenities. So, what features and amenities does the house that you're considering listing, or has the seller done any improvements on the home? So what features and amenities may exist? And then what's the garage size? Another huge one is garage size. Is it 2-car, 3-car, 2 plus, golf cart? What's the garage size? That could really impact it. And then any improvements that have been made on the house. So has it been upgraded since it was purchased? Has it been added on to? And then of course we have to get into discussions of permits, right?
Oh, permits.
Yeah. So
And how do you find out about permits again?
you can go onto the COJ website to find out what permits have been pulled for the property.
Oh, you just look up the property address and then
Mhm.
it'll tell you right in there.
It'll show you a
They
history
pulled
of the
them.
permits.
If
Excuse me?
Yeah, they pulled the permit.
If permits were pulled and who pulled them. And it'll also tell you if there are any open permits. It's good too when you're listing a property.
I find that also helpful when you're working with a buyer to go ahead and look at that property to see if there were any permits pulled, or like a septic tank or a drain field or anything like that. Just so that you can, research the property more for your customer.
Mhm.
I mean, yes, for a listing, but also when you're working with a buyer.
I think all the things we're talking about are good for buyers too. I think that it shows the buyer, and especially with some changes in our industry, being able to establish a stronger value proposition when it comes to the buyer, I think is going to be important. So that, you know, knowing that you do research uh, on properties that they're considering making an offer on, you're checking permits, you're whatever it happens to be, that you're doing something to assist in the development of that offer.
Mhm.
So which properties do we want to choose? So we want to select properties that are active. And I think this is on page 11, maybe. You want to select properties that are active. You want to select properties that are potentially contingent, active contingent. That means that they're under contract. You want to select properties that are pending, and you want to select properties that have sold. These would be the primary categories that you're looking at. Active and active contingent would be those that are on the market, right? Contingent means they have a contract, right? So does pending. Right? So active, talk to me about active. When you're looking at active properties, why do you want them?
Because they're current.
Because they're current, right?
That's your competition.
That's your competition, absolutely. Active properties are your competition. They're currently on the market. It'll show you what other properties are being priced at. Absolutely. So they're very important to help us kind of figure that out. Why active, contingent, and pending?
That's what it took to procure a list or a buyer. That's under contract in my mind means that a buyer was willing to make an offer and that those parameters are what it took to procure the buyer.
Okay. All right. So those properties represent what the market is looking for. So if you look at properties that are under contract, either active, contingent, or pending, you're seeing what the market is taking off of the market. So you can compare those properties to what your competition is to see what the differences are. You can compare those properties to what your current listing or what the potential buyer is going to make an offer on, how they compare. But those active, contingent, and pending are great indicators of what the consumer is actually taking off of the market. Austin, have you had any questions that I missed? You okay?
You said what the consumer is what?
What the consumer is willing to is what the consumer is consider what the consumer is willing to purchase. So those that are currently under contract or pending, those properties are the ones that buyers are willing to take off the market, right? So what's different about those properties than the one that you're listing, or what's different about those properties than the ones that are currently on the market?
I guess my only little bit of caveat here is while it may say, hey, the property's listed at $500,000, we don't know what the buyer offered to that seller to actually go under contract, where we might be thinking, oh, property was listed at 500, maybe they made an offer at 510 or 500 or 450. We don't know that.
You don't, and you won't know till the close, and that's why
Right.
you pick the close, because the close tells you what a buyer paid.
Right. So we really don't know what those contingencies are. We really don't know, but they are under contract. But we
Well,
don't know what the fine detail is.
we don't know what the terms of the contract
Yes.
are. You're correct. But we know that those properties that are under contract,
Mhm.
buyers were willing to take them off the market for a reason.
So what
we
can
want,
we look to? What can we look for?
well, you would want to look at the condition of the
Condition.
property. You'd want to look at the time on the market. So for example, if you look at a property that's off of the market, you know, that's active, contingent, or pending, and you look at one that's on the market, and they're very similar, but the one that came off of the market had been on the market for 120 days when the average days on the market were 60 days. Well, maybe somebody made an offer that the seller finally took.
So I
we
guess
don't know, but we can evaluate the condition of the property. We can evaluate the features of the property. We can evaluate things that we can see to determine if there are any major differences to help guide us in not only the pricing, but what may need to be made, what adjustments may need to be made in our evaluation or after we get the house on the market.
And we could also look at their price improvements.
Sure, the history of the property on something that is already under contract is a great indicator of maybe the desired motivation to sell a property of the seller, not necessarily what their motivation is to sell, but that they got to a point after a certain amount of time on the market that that they were willing to take less, or that they were willing to adjust their pricing. Yeah, so that someone could have gone in, and made a lower offer, and maybe they were willing to take it, even though the condition of the home is similar to one that's currently on the market. That could definitely be an indicator. And then the sold is what they paid. So that's where that brings the whole story together. And what was the condition? How was the days on the market? The sold says what they actually paid for it. So that establishes our true market value of the property. So these are the different status options of properties that you'll be looking at when you're trying to evaluate for a market analysis. So how do the lenders evaluate the comps? Lenders are really going to be looking at comps in a variety of different ways. They're going to be looking at comps to see, if they make sense. So their most important question is the home similar? So when they're looking at an appraisal or they're looking at an evaluation, and this is what you're going to have to do, is even though your CMA doesn't go to the lender in most cases, now it could potentially, if you're at a short sale situation or some sort of a distressed property, the lender could request your CMA, but that's up to them if they do. But in most cases, your CMA doesn't go to the lender, but the lender will look when they're evaluating either a CMA or an appraisal, they're going to be looking to ensure that the properties that were used were the most similar to the house as possible. So they're not going to look for, usually they're not going to see, unless it can be stated that a 2-story and a 1-story have the same value in that market area, they're going to question if you're using a 2-story comp on a 1-story property, it's a 1-story subject. So being able to have those homes very similar is important. They're going to be looking for the appeal. So what's the style? What's the condition of the property? That's very important to them. How lenders are looking at the property itself.
Did we expired and withdrawals? Were we going to go over that?
You can pull expireds and withdrawals.
How does that, what's, never really gone over that before.
So let's back up then. You want to go back to the types of properties that you're choosing?
Mhm.
Okay, so yes.
So for expired, would that look at the features and see, hey, why did somebody want this property, or what's the reason? How many days on the market was it? Maybe the seller took it off the market, or it expired. So
market condition can really determine whether or not you're going to be looking at expired listings.
Okay.
So if a property has expired and now you're being asked to list it, that could indicate, the viability of your listing that property. In other words, what was it listed for previously? Do they have any reason why it didn't sell? I mean, that would come during your seller consultation. When you're looking to price a property, if you see a lot of expired listings in a market, you may want to look at those as background for what pricing has not sold or what condition or style has not sold. So that if you're listing a property and the expireds come into play, or you're trying to figure out why this property that you're listing hasn't sold, what you may want to look at is, has it expired recently? Have other properties similar to it expired? So the expired can be kind of a storyteller more than an evaluative, a number evaluation on a property. They can be an indicator of what the market is doing.
Thank you.
As for withdrawals, you're looking at properties that's a property that's still listed. So they've just taken it off the market briefly. So you'll want to see those only to know if a withdrawn property is coming back on the market, what's its current condition, or if you can see anything that's been done to the property while it was withdrawn. That's another reason you want to really know the market area too. So back to lenders, what lenders are looking at, that's page 13. Yeah. So they really are looking for the most similar properties. They are looking for properties that are as close to the subject property as possible. they don't like to see a ton of adjustments. There shouldn't be a ton of adjustments. They're looking for appeal, style. They're looking for any adjustments that were made and why they were made. So they want to, if an adjustment was made, was there something that could have been used that didn't need that type of an adjustment, especially if it was age of sale or something like that. So they're going to be really looking, because lenders are looking to see that the collateral has the value based on what they're lending. So they want to, or to set the parameters of what they're lending. Also location, again, location comes up here. Location is something that you're going to look at. Location is something they're going to look at. If it's far away from the subject property, why was that one used? So when you're looking at land, or you're looking at a property with a specific use, like a waterfront property, like a horse property, those may be further apart because they may not be as available in the same area. But did you have to make adjustments for them based on area, based on their value for the area? So location comes into a big play on that. Challenges in working with information when you're selecting comps. There's a lot of challenges that come up. I'm sure that as you go through looking at properties, one of the things that we see is wrong or misleading information. So where does that usually come from?
The people who are entering it in.
So the comparables are only as good as the people who enter the information. So wrong or misleading information is very common because either a listing associate has not done their research, or they've learned other things about the property while they've had it listed and haven't bothered to disclose those items. Maybe they had a seller's disclosure and they found out something was in error in the seller's disclosure, but they didn't have the seller redo the seller's disclosure. That's an error. Maybe the pictures that they put into the MLS aren't accurate. In other words, they've been doctored in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they virtually staged it, but they forgot to identify what the room really looks like without the staging. So wrong or misleading information is a matter of human error. And that's not uncommon in our business when it comes to trying to evaluate properties. You have to really do your due diligence. It's important that when you're evaluating a property to potentially list, and this is again why you don't want to do it at the last minute, you should go out there. You should go out to the parcel that you're considering interviewing on, or that you will be interviewing for the listing. You should take a picture of it. You should drive around the neighborhood. If there are properties close by that are available for sale, you should set appointments and view those properties. You need to have the three-dimensional, full-on understanding of what you're potentially listing, or you have to have a full-on understanding of what the buyer is really looking at buying. So it becomes your research, part of your job. And here's the other thing is that I think that we're going to probably need to do a lot more of is we're going to need to tell buyers and sellers that we do that. A seller who's listing with you, if they're paying your fee to list the property, and whether they choose or not to offer compensation to the other side, that'll be their determination. But if that's what they choose, then they need to understand what the other properties are like also. You need to understand what the other properties are like so you can establish value not only for the seller, but if you end up working with a buyer, what are the other properties like? You need to know the neighborhood. That's why geographic targeting can be really good. Lack of photos. Only one photo is required in MLS. One photo needs to be on a listing within 7 days. That's the only requirement for photos. There's no requirement that the photo be professional. There's no requirement that the photo be done with the correct light. There's no requirement that the photo be done representative of the property.
By 7 days, one photo required in MLS by 7 days.
Within 7 days of listing it.
I thought there was always, because they all of them look professional when I look at them. I guess because
Really?
So, yeah.
You need to look at more.
Really?
Oh, they're awful. They're terrible. It's one of our worst. It's one of our biggest Achilles heels.
Photos don't usually match up either.
That's what I've learned. Like I'd be just looking for fun. and
You
look
get
at
there
stuff,
and you're like, whoa.
wait, this backyard is not as big as it looked, and this isn't really what it was.
Yeah.
So lack of photos or misleading photos are really a bad thing. We as professionals don't do what we should do. We should get a professional photographer out there. We think that because we know how to use our iPhones that we can, and our Samsung phones, that we can take the best pictures ever, and we can't. That's not your specialty. I
If we
mean, if
do
you're a
have-
photographer and a realtor, then maybe it is, but use professional equipment, use good equipment, take strong photos. It's the first showing you'll have online. Go ahead, if we have.
Mhm. If we have a professional photographer come out and they take pictures and maybe they make the grass a little bit greener, should we go ahead and tell? Should we let them know that the picture has been, was there a statement that we need to use about that so that they know, hey, maybe this area's got a little bit of a dark color and there's no grass over there, but sometimes they'll take the pictures and make the grass look greener.
Cool, that's a violation.
What?
Yeah, you're not allowed to Photoshop listing. You're not allowed to Photoshop photos in.
So if it's done by the photographer, that's bad.
Yes,
Yeah, people do that.
I know a lot of people do that. So if a photo is Photoshopped, that's a violation of MLS rules. So those blue skies over the house that have been input, that's a violation.
So how do you
Putting
know?
putting grass where there is no grass is a violation.
Putting a fire in a fireplace even though there's no fire in it.
That's a big one. That's that's
They
a
do
big one.
this.
I know that's a big one that's in question. That's
Maybe more appealing.
No, but right, because the photographer that I hired, she did this and she didn't ask me. She just, and I'm telling on myself right now, she put a fire in the fireplace. I thought, oh, that's neat.
well, that's a very common thing that people
And I've
do.
seen that now
Right.
in
right.
many photographs.
Right. You're not supposed to be photoshopping photos. You're not supposed to be photoshopping photos.
No photoshopping.
If she greened up the grass and there is grass, that's one thing. If she put grass where there's no grass, that's a completely different thing. You're not supposed to be photoshopping photos.
That is good.
Photos are supposed to be a true representation of the property.
Yeah, because but then we had a situation where a buyer purchased a property. I represented the buyer, and the picture on the MLS was this lovely little neighborhood, and it didn't look like that at all. The house looked very similar, but the yard and the surrounding area was completely different. And then there was a statement at the bottom that said, this photograph it was new construction, may not represent blah, 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 blah.
Okay. All right. So new construction, if they're using drawings or if they're using renditions, they can say that this is a rendition of the property, or this
So
is
new
one of the
construction can get away
elevations.
with it.
Well, they're not supposed to be able to get away with it. I mean, what they're using is drawings, and we know that there are different elevations that one can choose when building a home. If it's a home that's already built, they should be using the pictures of the home that's built. So
This is there was one takeaway that I needed from today. This is it.
So photos are supposed to be representative. I mean, I wish we could require all of you to use a professional photographer. The one thing I will say is that virtual staging is very common also.
Mm-hmm.
And
What do you mean by that?
So they'll add in furniture like a couch or a bed, and it's not really there, but they're able to, like through like CAD or whatever system they use, they're able to fill the room up with a potential like dresser and a chair and a plant. And so it looks like when you walk into this house or when you're looking at it online, it looks like it's completely decorated inside. You go and it's completely blank.
Misleading? Or
well, no, so the rules are that if you use virtual staging, you must disclose that it's virtual staging, and you must put the photo of the virtual staged property next to the photo of the photo of the virtual staged room next to the room that is not next to a non-staged room.
So I guess when you're working with a professional photographer, I think this is where it's important to say, hey, don't doctor up any of my pictures at all. This is something
Well,
that they
the
do.
professional photographers shouldn't be doctoring.
No.
Most of the ones that we have don't.
Learn enough for you.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm,
And I
okay.
had no control over it. Like she was like, this is what I do. And it wasn't like she asked me, this is what I received back. And the communication afterwards was,
Yeah, so we shouldn't be receiving doctored photos. We shouldn't be using doctored photos. We shouldn't be using misrepresentative photos, but we should be using professional photos versus photos that we take with our iPhone. Even though I know many of us are very good with our iPhone, it's not, unless you're a trained photographer, you really shouldn't be doing it.
yeah.
It's, I mean, we have to think about this. We're listing someone's home, one of their biggest investments, and I get it. We have to invest also, and we don't get paid until it closes. I get that also. But we want to make sure it looks the best it can possibly look to the point of it's being real.
Mhm.
And with 98 to 99% of people having their first showings online, when those pictures get out there, that's the showing.
Mhm.
That's what's either going to bring the person to see the home or to ask for more information about them. So the pictures become very important. So bad pictures or lack of pictures communicate to the consumer that this is a deal. So then you end up getting a lot of lowball offers. Or potentially getting lowball offers. Not always, but
All the other pictures are right on point, but it was just a little bit of green in the grass. She had plenty of grass. It was just the time of year, grass changes, and
Usually,
it was just a little bit greener than normal.
okay, well, that's the other thing that we do as a mistake. We list a property at the holidays and then there's all the Christmas or particular decorations up. And then it's February and it still hasn't sold, and we haven't bothered to have a photographer come out and update the pictures. It's ridiculous. That's a clear sign right there that the property has been on the market too.
Mm.
So now, I mean, or that's been on a long time. Well, is that a long time based on the current market conditions or a long time based on a different type of market conditions? So what story are you telling with those pictures also?
Oh, that's a good one.
Changing market or market changes. Big one, being able to use properties in your market analysis and really create a true range, a value range. Market conditions and market changes make that something you need to watch on a regular basis. I mean, we haven't shifted to a buyer's market, but we're sure in some of our areas very close to it being a buyer's market versus a seller's market. Inventory is up to what, 7,800? I mean,
That's
it's
pretty much,
huge.
yeah. That's a lot.
So market changes really can impact how you use comps, and changes or adjustments you may need to make. Personal property. So remember, personal property should only be the property that's supposed to stay in the house. Anything that's in, paragraph 16 or paragraph 13 in the listing agreement that lists out what stays, what would be customary to stay, whether it's the drapes or the refrigerator or the washer dryer, those kinds of things stay. And notice it even says at no value. If it's furnishings that's personal property, that shouldn't impact the value of the property. That's something that's sold outside of the transaction under a bill of sale. So those items that are staying on the property that would be considered normal to stay on the property or outlined in the purchase and sale agreement, whether it's smart home items or drapes or stove or oven or dishwasher, those are considered to stay in the home if the seller chooses to leave them and they're staying at no additional value. Anything else, the boat, the car, the furniture, all that's supposed to be done in a bill of sale away from the house. So you shouldn't be evaluating those in the value, establishing the value of a property or the value range of a property. Arm's length transactions. So this is another one of those things that you really want to look at. You're not going to see a lot of non-arm's length transactions in MLS because most of the properties in MLS should have used a licensed realtor or a real estate professional in the listing and sale of the property.
What's arm's length?
So an arm's length transaction would be a transaction that would be considered a traditional transaction where there was a buyer and a seller, and that the buyer wanted to buy and the seller wanted to sell, and the terms and conditions were negotiated between the buyer and the seller. A non-arm's length transaction would be something like, I'm selling my home to my niece and I'm giving her a deal on it. So that's really not an arm's length transaction because the market value on my home may be $400,000, but I'm selling it to her for $300,000 so she can get a she can get a good deal and get started, right? So that would be a non-arm's length transaction versus a traditional sale where my niece comes in and wants to buy the house at fair market value. So if there are other things
Is that like,
influencing, excuse me,
I'm sorry,
that's right.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Clark. Is that like you saying you're giving your niece a deal? Like she's using um, the escrow? Like I guess I'm looking at it on the lender side, like, cause you can use your escrow only when you're dealing with family members versus putting down the down payment of cash. Is that like the same thing or no? The escrow and the
I think we're
property.
talking about a variety of different things. So when you're talking about escrow, I need to clarify whether you're talking about the escrow amount, in other words, the binder amount, or if you're talking about an escrow account. So that's
As in the binder, as in the binder, yes.
the binder. Okay, so um, if a non-arm's length transaction wouldn't necessarily involve a binder in that way. I think what you're talking about is an assignment. I'm not assigning my contract to my niece. I'm the seller and my niece is the buyer. So if I assign my contract, my binder remains my binder. However, if I'm assigning it to her, the binder, unless she pays me back for the binder sticks where the binder sticks. So I think we're talking about an assignment versus a sale. So an arm's length transaction means there's a buyer and a seller, and the buyer and the seller are negotiating and moving forward in a traditional transaction. A non-arm's length transaction would be that the buyer is selling the seller is selling the property to the buyer at either a discounted rate or a rate that wouldn't be fair market value.
Mm, okay.
Okay, so I don't feel like we've answered your question. The escrow account or the binder is a buyer would put a binder down when they're buying. So if my niece is buying my house, but I'm selling it to her at less than market value, she would still put a binder down. If I'm assigning a contract, if I'm a buyer and I've put a contract in on a property and now I'm assigning my rights to my niece, the binder still sticks with that property.
So maybe the escrow then, because I know like, I guess it doesn't matter because it's two different things. And what I'm thinking on the lender side, is actually the equity. Like if you have, like you said, you selling it to your family member for less than what the property is valued at, they can, if just say, your daughter or whomever it is needed assistance with down payment, you can use the equity in the property. So basically it's no funds being transferred as in cash. They're using that as the down payment. Is that kind of like the same thing? Like instead of a gift fund for funds, they're using the gift fund in the form of equity.
So yeah, you're talking about a lending item. What we're talking about is evaluating properties for the use in a CMA. You're talking about how a buyer buys, and in that case, if you want to relate it back to what we're talking about, that would be a non-arm's length transaction. That would be a non-traditional transaction. So that would be
Okay.
that in using that property as part of your market analysis, you would need to make an adjustment on that comparable property in order to be able to use it. Otherwise, that would not be a good property to use in your market analysis.
Okay. See, this is how my brain get going crazy because I guess I was looking at it from the lender side and trying to put it into what you're speaking of. Are we looking at we have something that we're looking at? Cause I kind of logged on a little behind you guys.
So yeah, we're talking about creating a market analysis and how to create a market analysis and how to evaluate properties to include in a market analysis. And one of the things that you want to evaluate when including a property is whether or not the transaction was an arm's length transaction. So an arm's length transaction would be a traditional transaction, and a non-arm's length transaction would be where there was some sort of a concession made in selling that property. So you're talking about the lending, you're talking about how a buyer paid for a property. If you learn that that was the reason that a property that should have sold for 450,000 sold for 350,000, you would probably not use that property in your market analysis.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
Sorry.
and yes, there's a packet that I'll send you later, because you came on late. There's a packet I'll send you later that we're going through.
Okay.
So any other questions we want to bring up about arm's length transactions? So again, a non-arm's length transaction, you want to use arm's length transactions. You want transactions that were a buyer and a buyer bought and a seller sold.
How would we know if it was a non-arm's length transaction?
You would know it if there was something unusual about it. So if you go into MMT and you're looking for additional sales that have occurred in the market and it's a $100 deed transfer,
Oh,
that's not a traditional sale. That was something that either moved from a personal ownership to maybe a trust ownership. It was something that may have been passed from one person to another person. So that home would not be something you would want to consider using in a CMA. Now, if you go into MMT and you find a property in that subdivision that closed recently and you can't find it in MLS, and that property has a market value that's similar to other things that you're looking at, that would most likely be an arm's length transaction, and you could potentially use that in your market analysis as an additional property. Because when you get in front of a seller will often say to you, well, the house around the corner sold for, $600,000. So you now go look up that property and you see that it sold for $600,000, but it never made it into MLS and it's way off of market value. Well, I probably wouldn't use that in a CMA. I'd want to evaluate that property compared to the property that I'm considering listing to determine whether or not it's a similar property, so that I could go back to the seller and say, yes, that home sold, and here are some of the differences from that home to your home. And we'd have to make these kind of adjustments on that home, and that's why I'm not considering using that in my market analysis. It could have been, we don't know why it sold for over market value at that point, but I would say it may not have been a true arm's length transaction. So it may not be something you want to use. Does that make sense? Austin, are you good? Just give me a thumbs up. I know you're not on. Okay. All right. So creating the CMA. Let's move on to creating the CMA. And I think that's page 15, 16. And little booklets. Just as a heads up on the resources for the CMA on page 15, MLS is your primary resource. Metro Market Trends is an ideal place to check to see if other properties have sold that you may want to include into your market analysis. And Real Property Resource is a great one to utilize as a guide or as to give you a point of jumping off of to see kind of how you're looking at your evaluation or what kinds of things could be used in your evaluation. The CMA in RPR is pretty good. They will show you some properties that they've used.
I love RPR.
Yeah, RPR is great.
And it's good. It's very user-friendly for adjustments.
It is user-friendly for adjustments. MLS is pretty user-friendly for adjustments too, because you can do auto adjustments. But it's also one of those things that you have to figure out, does it have what you're looking for? Because sometimes when you're looking in RPR, If you've done a pre-analysis in MLS, you may not find all those properties in RPR. Depends on when they came over. So let's talk about creating that CMA. When your resources for your comparables, again, MLS, MMT, RPR, all great resources. RPR does use algorithms, so just know that sometimes they're not always the strongest, and you may need to still make adjustments even based on what they're using. When you do your adjustment analysis, there are really two types of analysis. There's your cost-based analysis, and there's your market-based analysis. So the cost-based analysis is really what's the cost of something if I'm going to improve that. So if I'm going back to one of the original suggestions was, what was the updating on the kitchen? If I have no updates, and then what was the updating on the kitchen? What's it going to cost to update my kitchen? Well, it could be $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000. Who knows how much you're going to spend to update your kitchen? So that's a cost-based analysis. So the value attached to an item for adjustment is based on the cost to construct or add that feature. The challenge with that is that on the cost-based analysis, if I look at the cost to do a kitchen, I may have one value. If you want to upgrade that kitchen, you may have another value because you may use higher end appliances or more expensive quartzite, or so the cost-based analysis is great to establish where you want to get to, but the market-based analysis or paired analysis is probably the stronger way, in the way that we evaluate differences or the value of a difference in a property, an amenity or a feature in a property. And this is really establishing what the value is established by the market in a market-based analysis or a paired analysis. So what that does is look at a feature. So if I have a home and it has, let's use a pool. It has a pool on it, but I want to find out what the value of that pool is. I would have to find 3 very similar homes that have a pool and 3 very similar homes that don't have a pool. So I would need a good 4 to 6 homes, some that have a pool and some that don't have a pool, to evaluate what the value of that pool is in that market. So if I have 3 homes and those 3 homes with pools come up to $900,000, so then the average is $300,000, right? Now I take those 3 homes without a pool, and let's say they came up to what, $870,000. And what's that divided by 3? Or $850,000. What's that divided by 3? 8 and 5 are 13. So no, 8 and 7 are 15. So $870,000 would be 200 and. All right, so let's just doing math.
It'd be
Let's-
290.
Okay, so let's say that the value of the homes without a pool was average 290, and the values of the homes with a pool was 300. So what's the value of the pool?
10,000.
$10,000. So a value of a pool in a certain area may be $10,000, where that a pool out in another area may be $30,000 or $40,000. So that's why it becomes the paired analysis becomes very market oriented, market driven. That's why it's called market based, because you're finding the feature in home, you're finding homes with the feature and homes without the feature to establish what the value of that feature is, so that you can make an adjustment if necessary. So it's the market-based analysis versus cost. You see why that's important, especially on resale?
So the pool was the market based. The example that we just used for the pool was the market based.
It's market-based because we're saying that there are homes with a pool, and the average value of the home with the pool is 300. The average value of the home without the pool is $290. Therefore, the value of the pool is $10,000. On the cost-based analysis, we would say, in this home, I want to put a pool, and the pool that I want to put in is $60,000. So I want to adjust my offer price by $60,000.
So like the dock
Correct.
scenario.
Correct.
All these homes on the water have docks, this one does not. So we would have to adjust that off.
You'd have to determine what the value of the dock is. So you would have to find 2 or 3 homes in and around that area of similar
Easy to
style
do.
that have a dock and what they sold for, and then 2 or 3 homes that are waterfront that didn't have a dock and what they sold for.
And, oh, yeah, okay, that's, wow, okay.
So yeah, so you're saying this 2,500 square foot house doesn't have a dock and it's on water. So what's its value?
Mhm.
Well, the value of the dock is what 2 or 3 other homes that are roughly 23 to 2,600 square feet sold for with a dock versus 23 to 2,600 square foot houses on water that didn't have a dock. That's the value, the market value of the dock.
Okay, so as I was representing a buyer that wanted to purchase a home and they wanted to build a dock and they wanted to put in an offer. And this is the only home that doesn't have a dock.
Right.
So then I could go on to the MLS, we'll go out to the property first, look at the property, and then go onto the MLS and look at surrounding properties that had the dock, didn't have the dock, look at the prices of the homes. Prices of the homes, what if they weren't on MLS? How would we determine the price of the home? If
the home sold and it isn't in MLS, it should be in MMT.
Okay.
So you get the sales price there.
Okay, and what if the surrounding property homes are built without ever going through MMT? Like they were not, there's
every property,
or one owner situation, maybe they built the property.
that's fine. That should still be an MMT. The MMT is a tax record database, so it should still be there. The value of that home would probably not be relevant because the home, well, it'll show you a market value.
Might have to look at market
number.
value times the square footage of a home possibly and land.
So no, I mean, you're going to want to pick homes that are similar to the home that you're trying to evaluate. So if I have a buyer and they're looking at a home that doesn't have a dock,
Right.
and they're trying to figure out what kind of an offer to make on that,
Mm-hmm.
I may try to help them by evaluating whether the asking price of the home is accurate based on what I see.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm saying, if I'm saying to the buyer, I want to help you by evaluating this property, I would have to find properties that have docks and don't have docks that are very similar. And of those properties, I would want to know what their current value is.
That's the part that I would feel like I would have some trouble finding.
Well, most of them are in MLS.
So for example, like the property in St. Augustine that had both docks, but we were trying to figure out what kind of offer to make based on what was listed. And that's very kind of rural area where you've got no subdivisions whatsoever, but these tracts of land where people have built homes, even built their own homes.
Right.
And you're trying to help your buyer come up with they're like, hey, what do we need to offer? They're not familiar with the area, but they want to make a good offer, but they also don't want to be in a situation where maybe somebody's taking advantage of this piece of property and have it way over listed really, really high. So doing my due diligence as a realtor and being able to search other properties in that location.
Well, remember, you're talking about something that's very unique. It's waterfront, right?
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, waterfront, again, remember we talked about if I can't find a home in that subdivision, I need to find a subdivision that's similar in age, similar in style. The same thing can be said about waterfront. So if I can't find enough waterfront property in that area, or let's say within a mile radius of that area, then I have to maybe expand my radius. So if I expand my radius and I pull a property, I find a property that is, excuse me, is waterfront and similar, but in a different area, I can use that as long as I can say that property, the value that currently is established on that property based on its recent sale is similar. Everything else about it is similar size parcel, similar size house, similar improvements. Then I can say, okay, great. Well, the only remaining factor is the dock.
How far out can you go on finding comps on a waterfront property? For example, St. Johns County, how far can you, I mean, you would have to stay in that county, correct?
You wouldn't necessarily have to stay in the county as long as what's dictating, which is water, is similar.
Okay.
You wouldn't compare a St. Johns River to a
Beach.
trout river.
Oh, Trout River, right, okay. No, definitely not.
Right, because the water is different,
Mhm.
different style, different width, different
Everything.
depth. I mean, yeah. So I'm not going to compare a marsh front property with an open water Ortega River property,
Exactly.
and I
Okay,
wouldn't
so
compare
the
Ortega
body of
River
water.
with St. Johns River.
Some areas.
Yeah, so the bodies of water have to be similar, and then the homes have to be similar
Okay,
to establish the value of the dock. And that so what you're trying to do is narrow it down so the main differentiating factor is the dock.
Mhm. Okay,
So you could take the two homes as they sit, evaluate those, and then determine if there were any adjustments that need to be made, and then from there adjust based on the value of the dock,
okay.
or establish the value of the dock.
Thank you.
This is why realtors don't do as much work on this as they should.
This is important because this is a value that I believe is what people are really looking for when they come to you. They ask these questions. I've seen it time and time again. And I feel like you just said, this is something that I need to improve on significantly.
We all do. We all need to improve on market on creating CMA.
Because this could really get you locked in with your buyers or your sellers to know you, like you, trust you, and also building that rapport and knowing what you're doing.
Well, I mean, I think we need to provide a market analysis to our buyers when they start to narrow down their properties. I think that we need to have the market knowledge for our buyers to be able to help them understand where the market's going, and then tell them that we're going to provide them with a market analysis. But I mean, I think that's part of our value proposition. The value propositions you have to start to create with buyers. And if everything goes through, every buyer that you meet will be required to sign a buyer's agency agreement. And they're not going to sign that until they at least have an idea that you're going to give them something. Right? So, I mean, the premise will be that all buyers will sign one before ever seeing property. I don't think that'll be reality. So,
Probably not. I don't know that a buyer would immediately just sign without you at least doing some type of work for them or showing them a property to see if even you're a good fit. Like, how would you know if you even wanted to work with that person yourself?
right.
Without having some type of work, doing something with them.
Right. Right. So what we're talking about is using these properties and potentially making adjustments. Where and how do we make these adjustments? We make these adjustments based on certain features. You can do it based on market expectations. In other words, what's the market telling us? You can do it based on financing. Any more financing is not as much of a differentiating factor because the financing has been pretty much equalized. The date of sale is important, though. Are we using a property that sold longer ago than the 6 to 8 months, or roughly even a year? And we can still use properties that have sold a year or two ago as long as we can show that the value in that market is stabilized, right? There's not a great difference in the value in the market. Bedrooms, bathrooms, those are two key features. However, the next one, size, which is often referred to as square footage, could be lot size also, but square footage. We don't make adjustments based on bedrooms, bathrooms, and square footage. You choose either bedrooms and bathrooms or square footage. So I should say bedrooms and square footage. Bathrooms can be made adjustments and can be made based on improvements in the bathrooms. But for size, you're looking at square footage, and you should have already established a square footage range that's reasonable.
So you can't use all three: bedrooms, bathrooms, and square footage. You need to pick
You
one
should
of
not
the
be
three.
making adjustments on all three of those.
You'd have to pick one.
Right. So what you'd be looking at is in a neighborhood, does a 3-bedroom go for less than a 4-bedroom first? And if there's really no price difference in a 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom, that means the consumer is not off-put by the size of the bedroom. So if a 2,400 square foot house is for 3 bedrooms and 2,400 square foot house with 4 bedrooms is selling for basically the same, then the market is telling you that there's no difference to them. Right? So you wouldn't adjust based on bedrooms. Then you have to look at square footage. If it's based on square footage, which is it the additional bedroom that's giving the square footage? So I would have to adjust based on bedrooms, or is it the square footage I'm adjusting on?
So you need to look at all three: bedrooms, bathrooms, and square footage.
You need to look at them, but you don't
Then
adjust on
that's-
all of them.
Look at them and then see which one is affecting the price, and then use
Which
that
is
as your
impacting-
adjustment.
what market element or what feature is adjusting the market value? Errors in making adjustments. So that was that double dipping that I talked about. Adjusting for a feature more than once. So that's what that's on the next page. And then making adjustments for the wrong reason. So the market determines if the adjustments are necessary. Do not make adjustments just to make yourself look better. Or to make you look like you're this professional that says, oh, well, I make adjustments on everything. Don't do that. Make an adjustment if the market dictates it at once. Outliers, a property that is sold very high or very low compared to other comparables, those should probably not be included in your market analysis. So if you're looking through, if it's a very low price, check to see if the property could have been a distressed property, like a short sale or pre-foreclosure. That could have impacted the price. So that if everything else that you're using is a traditional sale, financed FHA, VA. The other thing that we need to start looking at that I forget to put in here is concessions. So concessions, if concessions are being offered, is that the norm? So if I'm looking at 7 properties, and there's 7 sold properties, and all 7 sold properties offered concessions, then I don't need to make an adjustment based on concessions, as long as the average amount of concessions is similar. If one is very high, then I need to figure out why. Was it because it needed a new roof? What was the adjustment made for? Excuse me. Pricing skills, we really need to look at the market, which is the inventory and the stats. Excuse me. We also need to look at connections, which would be the appraisers and other realtors. This isn't in here. This is just up here. So these are where you're going to be looking for a lot of your information. And then the news. So where are you looking for information about it? Are you looking on the national news and local news to see what's going on in the market? When you're making your adjustments, are you looking at stats, inventory? Are you looking at your market summary? Are you calling other realtors? Have you met other realtors and spoken with them about their sale? So if you found one of those sales that was really weird, and that involved a realtor, like that you thought that it was very high, maybe you call the realtor and you find out, did you have a problem with the appraisal? No, it was cash, so you didn't have a problem with the appraisal because there was no appraisal. So that can impact the value of that property or the value that brings to your market analysis. And remember, we've had a lot of cash sales where appraisals weren't a contingency. So that this is what has been resetting a lot of the value in our market too. On page 20, we did include some adjustment figures. These are very random, just based on what we've learned from different appraisers, what we've learned from different home inspectors. There's a value sheet that was put out by one company. So these are just kind of rough estimates on values that people put on stuff. So pool above ground 5,000 to 15,000. In ground is really 8,000 to 12,000. But if you look at an in-ground pool in something like Ponte Vedra, you know, that can go as high as $40,000 and $50,000.
Mhm.
Where, I mean, there was probably a lot more put in, but you know, over in North Jacksonville, it may be $12,000. So it depends. Depends on the area. And notice these are adjustments based on market value. They are not adjustments based on cost, right? Because if you look at all brick home and you have a seller who's selling their home and they say, well, we paid $25,000 upcharge for all brick. Well, we can see that an all brick home is probably not going to get them an additional $25,000 when they go to sell it, right? So it's the market value of something like that. When we talk about pricing skills, we're talking about things like listening to the market, again, developing those connections, monitoring the news. It's that little graph kind of that we were looking at. So it's, you got to kind of think about all those different things. Client education, really the real estate professional is constantly learning about the market. You've got to really kind of be aware. You've got to be educated on your markets. You've got to stay in tune with your markets. You've got to stay in touch with what's going on. Your clients may not be as engaged as you. As a matter of fact, they probably never will be. They don't list and sell as much as you do. They see what's going on and only get
News.
half of the information, or they hear from a neighbor. Neighbor has all the news, right? Take time to make sure that they understand. Common buyer blunders would be believing the AVM is accurate. That would be what we're referring to there as the Zestimate.
Oh my gosh.
Of all AVMs, that's
Just
probably
wait.
the most fluctuating AVM.
It fluctuates daily.
Listening to people who've been out of the market for some time. Oh, my sister was a realtor 7 years ago, and she said, well, 7 years ago, the market was very different. So, and my sister said that, you know, I need to be selling for 1,200,000. So taking the approach that every house is overpriced. So buyers will do, oh, every house is overpriced. This is overpriced. This is way too expensive. So I don't know. Have you done your market analysis? Have you shared that with them? Have you taken a look at what they're looking at and provided them with their feedback? And not getting a pre-approval prior to making the offer. This is a very common blunder. Someone gets interested in a home. You've showed them that the property is well priced, well valued, and that they aren't prepared with their tools. So making sure that they're prepared is part of your analysis.
And also, if they're not going to buy with financing contingency or financing, then they're going to use cash. Make sure you can provide some source of proof of funds, and make sure they have it readily available. And they're like, well, I have to get with my person at the bank, and it's going to take them a week to get that back to me. And then you're going to write an offer without any proof of funds. You're right.
Yeah, that's not going to. Not listening to the real estate professional. It's a definite buyer blunder. They don't use the professional to help them through this process, because this is still a very detailed process. So they need to kind of make sure that you're establishing yourself as the professional. Maybe that's our blunder too. Seller slip ups, pricing higher than the competition. The competition is, if there's a reason to price higher than the competition, then you need to make sure that that's part of your marketing strategy. But the competition is telling you, whether it's active, contingent, or pending, that competition is telling you what the market is doing. In other words, if it's on the market for an extended period of time, buyers aren't buying. If it came off of the market quickly, then what was it about the house that brought it off of the market quickly? Refusing reasonable offers. You know, sellers know that they have the right to accept, reject, counter. Here's the deal. If you forget to explain that to them, they forget that those options exist, and then they may turn down an offer when they could have potentially made it work for them. If their timing is not an issue, then it may not be a concern. But refusing reasonable offers is something that we have to deal with on sellers quite frequently, especially in this market, which is a shifting market where they're coming off of a very strong seller's market where they could price just about anywhere and get it. Not showing the property ready to market. or not having the property ready to market, or not having the property ready for a showing, I guess I could say that too. That's a big thing. Not having the property ready is really a big thing. Not reducing the price in a timely manner. Oh, well, let's just wait. Let's just wait and see. Let's just wait and see.
What's a timely manner in your opinion?
In my opinion, if you're not getting at least 3 to
Showings.
5 showings, if it's gone stagnant, excuse me, if your showings have completely dropped off, if you've had more than about 10 or 12 showings and no offers, and I'm talking offers from bona fide, it's hard to say that too, but offers from buyers, not necessarily investors.
Right.
So investor offers, once the house has been on the market, sometimes a week, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, we'll start getting investor offers, and those are often lowball offers. Investors sometimes want to tie up may make a strong offer and then want to just tie up the property and see if they can get a reduction at some point. So
what was the timely manner?
it's really dictated by the market.
Okay.
How long has that other property been on the market, or how long was that property on the market that was similar to yours that's no longer on the market? If it was on the market for 30 days and you're coming up on 45 days, then 2 weeks ago, we should have been discussing, we're getting close to when that other property came off the market and we don't have an offer. We may need to make an adjustment.
What type of adjustment? Just really depends.
You'll see a $500 adjustment, you'll see a $1,000 adjustment, you'll see $10,000 adjustments. It really depends on what the seller is comfortable doing. Sometimes a strategy that a realtor recommends is to reduce it $500 because it pops it up as a price reduced. So pops it up to the top of the list on people's hot sheets. I don't think that that's a really good thing to do.
Not $500. That's a joke.
Well, I mean, I've seen realtors schedule $500 price reductions so that the property on an every other week basis pops back up as a price reduction. I think it just makes the property look worse. But I mean, these are hard conversations you have to have, especially if they feel like the house is maybe worn in any way, shape, or form. Making showings difficult for potential buyers, a seller issue. And then not listening to their agent, big issue. Huge issue. So things to just keep in mind when you're creating, this has nothing to do really with creating a CMA, but it has to do with learning from the customer as to what they think the CMA is providing with them, or what the CMA is providing them. We put the pricing pyramid in there just to kind of help you. If you're looking at the CMA for the market, priced 15% above market, 10% of buyers will view this. So this was a guide for how your showings are going. Priced 10% above the market, 30% of the buyers will be viewing. Market value, 60% of the buyers will be viewing. So if you're priced at market value, you're going to get the greater amount of traffic. So if you're not getting the traffic, you may be 10 to 15% overpriced. If you're underpriced, you're going to get a bunch of offers, you're going to get a bunch of viewings, right? You get multiple offer situation. So this again is something to help you as you're identifying how you want to create or present your CMA. Your pricing challenges, these are great ones to work with for practice, if you will. So you're talking to a seller and the seller says, we can always come down in price, but we can't go up. Let's start at a higher number.
That is exactly what they say. Oh my gosh, how many times
So
have I done that?
how do we manage that?
That's a good question. How have I managed it?
Or what do we say to the seller who says that?
What have I said?
Austin and Adrian are out there too. So
well, I went with it.
Austin's doing the
I went with it. I did go with
okay,
that.
so all right, great, Mr. and Miss Seller. Here's the deal. Customarily, I don't take a price I don't list a property that's over 5%
There you go.
above my highest recommendation. I'm willing to do that for you as long as we build in price reductions.
There you go. That was the lesson. Even though the seller got on board and started allowing us to do price reductions in the beginning, if I had had that conversation, we could have built that into the listing. And then I could have automatically went in there and made price adjustments based on that written terminology in my listing with the 5 sellers, and not have to go back every single time and go, seller number 1, seller number 2. So can we all agree on this?
So I mean, I think that's one, is to build in price reductions if it's outside of your comfort zone. Set parameters if you would like to build in price reductions for evaluation. You know, if we don't have an offer after 2 weeks, we'll reduce it a certain amount of money. So you can set in caveats to still take the listing if you feel like it's a sellable listing, but it needs to be a sellable listing, and that potentially the seller is or is not in line with how the pricing should work. The buyer, I've heard this is a buyer's market, so I want to get a bargain. How about that? Buyer's market, I want to get, buyer's market, I want to get a bargain.
I would say, well, let's see what the market is telling us.
It's a buyer's market. So, I mean, I think one of the first questions we need to ask are, well, what do you consider a bargain?
Oh, there we go.
How do you define a bargain? Is it something that you're willing to work on? Is it something that you think is priced, you know, how much less should it be priced than the market value? Are you comfortable doing work on something? Is it condition or location? So I don't know. I don't know what a bargain is. I don't know what to tell. I don't know what a bargain is.
Right.
I told you my customer, she says, well, I just want something that, you know, in 2 years I can sell and make some money. Well, just about anything you buy, you should be able to make money in 2 years. Are you talking 3% per year? Are you talking 12% per year? Are you talking you want to buy it now at 150 and get 600 later? Okay, you know, I don't know. I don't know what that bargain is. I don't know what bargain means. It's rather rampant. So, you know, I think with buyers we have to say, well, what is a bargain to you? What does that mean? Sometimes it's actually seen houses understand. Seller, I've heard that the market is hot right now, so I want to price my home aggressively.
What's aggressively?
Okay, what do you mean aggressively? Based on the range that I've given you, what do you consider aggressive? The top of the range? I'm comfortable with that. That's fine. No, I want to go 30% over. Oof, okay. I'm not as comfortable with that. Seller, we completed X number of dollars of renovations on the kitchen last year, and the cost should be added to the suggested price. So we invested X number of dollars in a renovation. We think that that should be added to the price.
So this is where we would have to go back and look at the market and do a comparable.
I think we have to look at that. I think we have to do a couple of things. I think we have to say, okay, great. Well, we're already taking into consideration that you have an upgraded kitchen. You're looking at a cost-based analysis. Most buyers are looking at a market-based analysis. And in most cases, your investment on a kitchen, you'll probably get 60 to 80% back. So if that's your premise, let's see where we end up in our evaluation. And based on what you would like to add to it, does it make us in market range or out of market range? So I think it's one of those discussions you have to engage in. Most of the types of things you have to engage them with. The buyer, the seller says that Zillow says that the house is worth more or less than what your price range shows.
Oh my gosh. I've heard that one time. I've heard it 1,000. Oh my goodness. And then you know what I say to that? I say that that Zillow takes into account that for sale by owners can list their home at whatever price they determine. It's not a true market value, and that estimate fluctuates daily. And if someone lists their house 100,000 over market value, then guess what Zestimate's gonna do? It's gonna adjust based on that, so that's not real. It's not
So
accurate.
even Zillow in the fine print says that they believe their estimates are anywhere from 5 to 15% off,
Right.
up or down. So yeah, I understand that. You saw it, it's in print, it's on the internet, it must be true. But unfortunately, what the market is telling us from based on what we can see, it may not be as accurate as we had hoped. And then my neighbor's home sold for more than you're recommending. Well, did it
Every single one of these.
did it truly? I mean, so
Oh yes, did it truly? Where did they provide you that information? Did you get it off of MMT or was that a verbal? Because what the neighbor said may not be what they actually sold it for.
right. So, you know, the neighbor may be pontificating a little bit,
Exactly.
or, you know, embellishing a little bit, or, you know, so we would want to make sure that that information is accurate for them and provide them with a full resource that provides the best information. But these are all the kinds of things that sellers and buyers are going to talk about based on the evaluation that you give them. I never would have used that house. That's not a comparable house. So you have to be able to share why you believe that house is a comparable house. Size and square footage, location. They have to understand why you chose that house. So going through this information becomes very important to be able to share why you used each property.
On MMT, isn't that entered in faster than what did Jennifer over there at Meat Bar say about MMT? It's when looking for what the house sold for. It goes in faster than it does in MLS, or how does that work?
Well, the MLS is your most accurate data for properties that go through a realtor exchange.
Oh, right. But if they don't go through, like if it's a for sale by owner, you can find that on your MMT. So for instance, that neighbor sold their house without a brokerage, then that's where you would find the value or what they sold the house for is on MMT.
Correct. So that's why that's why one of the resources for your CMA should be MMT. So in presenting your CMA, it really needs to be an open discussion with your customer, but you need to be able to say why you did what you did, why you made the adjustments, why you selected the properties. They need to feel confident that the number that you're giving them, the range that you're giving them, is a strong, well thought out range that they can use to make an offer or to receive an offer or to price. So you may end up doing multiple CMAs for a seller because you're doing them when you first list the property. Of course, you should be doing them occasionally throughout the listing process to ensure that the value that you originally established is still a bona fide value based on market shifts and changes. Share with them the market analysis, not that it's not an appraisal. Share with them where you got your information. Share with them the details of the information. Don't be afraid to share that with them. Give them time to express their concerns. Help them understand what possible sticking points are. Write down their sticking points. Help understand what their motivation is to sell. What's their timing? When do they want to be out of here? And then what are their expectations? Very important to talk to your sellers. What are their expectations of this whole thing? One of the things I did want to make sure that as part of what we talk about when we're talking about talking to buyers and sellers, as part of our code of ethics, there are certain things we really can't say, and I think that that's part of what buyers and sellers are concerned about. So just so that you're aware, there's your pricing pyramid, sorry, it's that up here. Oops, I have them all here. Talk about the market, talk about your comps, talk about the pricing, and then for your realtor code of ethics when it comes to pricing, Article 1, standard 1.3, that's an Article 1, standard 1.9, and then Article 11. All of these are support as to things you can't say. So Article 1-3, if you're attempting to secure a listing by overpricing a listing, that's against our code of ethics. It's on page 27.
What did you just say?
If you attempt to get a listing by overpricing a listing, that's against our code of ethics.
How would that come about if the seller wanted their property listed at a certain price and you decided to take it? Would it be your intent if you knew that maybe somebody else was offering something else to them? I don't understand. So if a seller wants to list their house at X number and that's it, they're not taking anything less, and you decide to list with them for that reason, is that against our code of ethics?
No, if you choose to take an overpriced listing, that's different
Okay.
than overpricing a listing to get the listing.
Okay, that's what I wanted clarification on.
Yeah.
So if you had other people, if you were in a pool of people that the seller was potentially interviewing to list their property, and you knew that maybe so and so was saying, "Hey, we'll list your property at 240," and I'll say, "I'll list it at 275." That would be
against code of
Right,
ethics.
okay.
So yeah. So doing a CMA, knowing what you truly believe the range to be, and then you overpricing the listing, and we're talking about a significant amount.
Right.
You overpricing the listing to get the listing, that would be against code of ethics. We should not mislead, as Article 1, Standard 1.3 says, we should not deliberately mislead the owner as to the market value. Article 1 also talks about the obligation of a realtor to keep confidential information as defined by the state. So it's provided by their clients in the course of the agency relationships, including non-rep. We cannot reveal confidential information with clients, so their motivation we can't reveal. We can't use confidential information for clients to the disadvantage of a client. And we can't use confidential information of clients for the realtor's advantage or the advantage of third parties. So we can't take information that's shared with us and share it unless a seller tells us it's okay. So if a seller feels like they're being compromised in any way, or that they could be compromised in any way, we have obligations and we have a code of ethics, which should keep us in line.
Can you give me an example of that?
Example of which one?
Potentially sharing information.
So if I'm saying to you that I'm getting a divorce,
Okay,
that information you use, that my realtor can't use that information to talk to Dawson to say, well, they're considering getting a divorce, so go ahead and make whatever offer you want.
okay,
So my motivation to sell should not impact their motivation to buy unless I tell you that it's okay to share that information. So it shouldn't be compromised in any way, shape, or form. And then if you flip the page, there's Article 11 also, which says realtors shall not undertake to provide specialized professional services concerning a type of property or service that is outside of the field of competence. So again, that's the staying in your lane thing. You want to bring in other professionals. That's why, unless you're a professional photographer, you shouldn't be taking photos. You want to have good photos of your listings out there. You really do. I mean, it's the first showing people have. So the sellers and the buyers need to know that we're held to a standard, as realtors we're held to a standard. And that they should feel confident that their information is strong with us, and that the information we have is strong in presenting or creating a market analysis. So anyway, so that's a little bit about CMAs, how to create them, what types of properties you want to choose, how to present a CMA, what types of objections you may be getting, and making sure that your customers are aware that we have obligations to perform as part of our business, these should help you in establishing value propositions, especially with your buyers. And we need to be communicating those more openly and more readily these days. So let's throw it out for some questions. I'm going to stop sharing this. So we're back to just all of us. How about questions? Things about CMAs that we maybe didn't answer that you were concerned about. I'd like to go through a CMA, but we'll have to do that in creating one. I brought a property to do one on, but we'll have to do that at a separate time, I believe, since it is currently 12 o'clock. But I do want to make sure that if there are questions, we get those questions up.
I don't really have any questions. I just need to practice them more,
Yeah.
do more.
So, I mean, I think you said you've practiced on your house. I would encourage each of you to practice on your own. Take your own home. I mean, you now have one that you can utilize, but we need to figure out, yours is a great one because you're going to have to go outside your market area. And you have an unusual situation where in your subdivision, you can become a member of a club. That type of thing is not at a discount. That's not always offered at other subdivisions. So do you have to make an adjustment for that?
I would assume so.
I don't know. Who else is looking, where are other people looking that are looking in your subdivision? Is that even a thing that they want?
So if it wasn't something they want, would that be a subtraction?
If it's not something they want, since it's not an obligation,
Then it doesn't affect
then
it.
it doesn't affect it.
Okay.
If could it be something that someone doesn't want to pay the price of being in Jack's Golf and Country Club, but have a home very close and now have the benefit of a discounted membership? So could that not be a marketing strategy? I don't know if it can be a pricing strategy, but it can sure be a marketing strategy.
Okay.
I have to double check because I don't know if it's like since we live in there, we're like allowed to become members since we're outside. And I think anybody can become, because we don't get there's no discounted price, I believe. So I think I'm pretty sure anybody can become a member of Jack's Golf and Country Club. I gotta look that up, but I'm not 100% sure. It is a private club, but
you might be right there for golfing.
you can pay your dues. And
Well, I think you might be able to become a social member,
Mhm.
or you may be able to become a golf member.
Right.
But obviously,
Because that would be the only real reason why, in my mind, why you would, is so that you could use the course. And
right. So then that membership, could that be a strategy for marketing the property, even just to be able to buy in, but not have to pay the price of inside that club?
Okay.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't know the level of it that everybody can buy into. I don't know if where you're positioned allows you to purchase a different type of membership.
I could probably call them about, right?
Yeah.
Just be like, hey, we live here.
Yeah. And if it's not, then you would not even it's not even something to be marketed. If I can get a social membership at Jack's Golf and Country Club, and I can get a golf membership at Jack's Golf and Country Club, then what would living in there give me?
because you
So it may
you
not
can
be.
become a member of PPP and like Ponte Vedra Inn.
Ponte Vedra Inn Club
Yeah, use some amenities, you don't have to live there. Right.
membership is
That's
gone
correct.
way up.
What?
That membership is gone.
Oh, right. Yes, it has. Oh, I don't know.
The initiation fee is around 100. Anyway,
And the dues are like
That's 10 or 30, right?
1,200.
Yeah.
anyway. So I mean, yeah, you'll be able to. That'll be a good one to work with for you. See what other properties you think would be comparable. I would encourage each of you to, and maybe that's what we do is, why don't each of you work on your own, and next week we'll move seller consultation, and we'll come in and discuss this. We'll do a second half of CMA.
Yeah,
Actually do one. I think that'd be great.
that'd be
Because I think this is a good marketing tool we need it, not just a marketing tool, but I do believe this will help gain business to have your seller listings, is to have this really underneath your belt. Bye.
Adrian said something. 1 second. I don't want to interrupt. I have to go. Okay. All right. See you, Adrian. Both of them have to jump off. I'll go ahead and I think.
Or no, that was Austin who said.
Oh,
that.
Austin. Okay, Adrian.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. I thought Adrian had something there. All right. Adrian, did you have a question or anything?
Right now.
I'm sorry, you were.
I don't have a question.
Okay, all right. So
Can you
what
hear
we're
me?
gonna do is, work on doing a market analysis on your home for next week, and then bring those market analyses in or have them with you, and we'll try going through a market analysis together. Okay,